Hi, everybody. Drew from the Nesting Eagles podcast here with Beth. How's it going, Beth?
Pretty good, Drew. Nice and rainy day.
Yeah. You probably need some rain and
Very
not those
much
big
do.
storms. But we're doing something a little bit different today. We're going to do a kind of special episode for fledging, just because of its kind of that time, that start of the season where nests up in our area, up in Wisconsin, are starting to fledge. So I know I have a couple of our nests in my area really on branching and getting ready. So we just wanted to discuss some terms, discuss how fledging works, and there's no real correct way to do it. It's usually very ungraceful, but we'll go over, kind of what they do and what to expect on the Eagle cams. And if you are viewing a nest, just kind of gives you an idea of what's going to happen coming up. So I thought it would be a good episode to do. So.
Yeah. And to our viewers who are not part of our program, as far as watching a bald eagle nest in Wisconsin, just to let you know, we have around 300 bald eagle nests that we have 500 watchers watching. And so part of what Drew and I do, especially Drew, is educate us on what to look for, how to look for it, until we become seasoned. And so he actually oversees all of those nests, and I only oversee a section of those nests. But we decided to do a podcast to help out our nest watchers here in Wisconsin to know what to look for and what's coming up in the nest watching season. And that's where Jackie and Shadow's nest has been very nice because it's like 2 weeks ahead of us. And so we've kind of glommed on to that one in particular, to help foreshadow what we're going to be doing here in Wisconsin. And so we just wanted to say we do not dedicatedly watch those nests. We come in, catch snippets, and back out because we have volunteers calling us and texting us and emailing us, quite a bit, as well as taking care of our jobs and family and home. So we have a lot on our plate. But we just want to let you know how much we think Jackie and Shadow's Nest is fabulous, how Sandy and everyone who run it are doing a gangbuster job because I could never do that job, and I don't think Drew could either. Neither one of us would want to take on that task. So, knowing exactly all the idiosyncrasies of those nests are not something we're able to entirely focus on. But we hope you still find us educational. We were thinking about making this podcast private, and we decided to not do that in case there was anybody else who wanted to learn about eagle behavior in the nest. And so we're happy to have anyone else on board, and please subscribe and please like it. But we're doing the best we can as volunteers in our state, and so hope you can appreciate that. And with that, let's talk about branching and fledging.
Yep. So first, we're going to show a little bit of a video that Beth took about one of her nests. This was last year, Beth, I
I
believe,
think it was
a
no, it
couple
was
of
at
years ago.
least
Okay.
3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll watch that. Let me get this to play. And apologize. It might be running a little slow, but you'll get the gist of what's going
It's looking
on.
better this run through.
Yeah.
So what we actually have is we have a bird that is fledged to the right in the screen, and the one that has stopped flapping, that is a brancher. And then in the nest is kind of hidden by the trunk a little bit because he blends right in, is an eaglet that just won't even attempt anything. The fact that he stood up was pretty impressive, and we were hoping to catch him maybe start to wander out on a branch. But when you're a three eaglet nest and you're the third of the three eaglets, um, and your two siblings have gone on to fledge and branch, all of a sudden you've got the house to yourself. I mean, that bird can spread out for the first time ever. And they tend to be a little resistant to leave the nest. Now, it could be a female because females tend to branch and fledge later than a male. They're a bigger bird. But I think it's also indicative of, hey, I got the place to myself. And that's a little bit of anthropomorphizing, but I can relate to it. So I find it a little interesting that oftentimes three eaglet nests, the third eaglet is a rough one to get out of the nest.
Yeah. Yeah. And
We'll show you
this is
some
a
tricks. that the
Yeah.
parents have for that.
Yeah, they have especially the more experienced ones. So this is a great one because you get kind of three steps with three different eaglets where one's fledged. You can kind of see one thing that I've always noticed when after a fledge, there's kind of a different body language, and you've probably seen this, Beth, too.
Yeah.
Once they fledge, um, they're a little less anxious. You can see it. You can kind of, I don't know if it's, maybe we're just projecting human traits on them, but you kind of see more confidence that, hey, I did this. I've flown before, and I'm kind of a big bad eagle now. So you kind of see that personality come out of them, where one that's branching is kind of in completely a state of like just craziness and working on those wings and building up to fledging. It's a little more chaotic, I guess, too.
Yeah.
And then the
Well, and
ones in
because
the
it's not just about building muscle mass to be able to fly, it's, cardiovascular too. These guys have been sitting around like, little Jabba the Hutts, in the nest, just feeding, 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 and not doing a lot of exercising and not doing a heck of a lot of walking either until, just a short time before they're going to start branching and stuff. So they're the biggest, I think we've even said this last week, they're the biggest they'll ever be in their lives at this point in their development. And from here on out, they're going to get leaner. And you can see, I like this picture
yeah.
because the one branching who has obviously lift, he's disconnected from the branch now. And I'm saying he in just general. So I don't know the gender of these guys, but um, very confident to let go of the branch. And you can see its siblings sitting there sort of admiring what he's doing or, taking it in, watching it, maybe learning from it. But as Drew knows, right at this point, you let go of that branch. If there's a good gust of wind, you have just unintentionally fledged.
Yes.
And an unintentionally fledging eaglet, you know, you're not sure what's going to happen. At what point are they going to realize that they don't have anything below them and they need to use their wings? Because this is not, um, it's like you when you were a child and you learned to walk. You or ride a bike without training wheels. You get it, but you don't get it until you've got it. And boy, that was kind of a catchy phrase. But, until they really have that confidence, like Drew was saying, it's you're never really sure where they're going to end up and how well they're going to handle the situation.
Yeah, I think there's a perception that fledging is graceful and it's intended, and a lot of times it's not. I've seen that a number of times. The times that I've seen been out at a nest and been lucky enough to see a fledge, it's usually accidental, where they're out branching, getting ready, really whipping their wings around and just with a tizzy in it, as you mentioned, Beth, like either wind kicks up or the branch shifts, where it's a little bendy and then they kind of tumble. And luckily, the one that I saw was in a big white pine, a very tall nest, probably 90 feet up. But fortunately for this guy, he had a white pine, so he pretty much bounced his way down about halfway down the tree and then scampered almost up to the nest over the course of the next hour, trying to get back. So that is technically a fledge. It wasn't graceful, and it was completely unattended. But there was no intention to do that. But it happens, and that's one of the ways that they fledge. And we'll look at some more pictures here. So this is a number one. They kind of take those little flights. We use a designation called full fledge, and what full fledge means is they have actually left the nest and taken a short flight. These little jumps and really tiny flights, we don't consider that a fledge. That's a branch and getting ready, but it's not quite a fledge. So that's a term that we used is full fledge, and that is a just it pretty much tells you that they have actually left the nest. They've taken that first flight. They haven't scrambled up the branch and taken little jumps and hops, which they do a lot of when they're about to getting ready. And
So
let's
this is the last one in the series
okay, let's go.
of
We'll go.
yeah.
Let's see, where
Ooh.
is it? Okay.
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Right,
Right there.
right here.
So nope,
Yeah,
that one. So this was a case where the sibling on the left wanted to get back to the nest, and the nest is off to the right. And so its sibling was in the way, and it tried to duck under it a couple different ways. And this is one I called you about, Drew, because I said, is it technically a fledge if they flew over their sibling to get back to the nest? And it was a fledge. It used its wings. And there it
so
is
it's
about
that's
to
the middle one.
launch
Yeah,
over its sibling, but it was just done branching and it wanted to go lay down. And then that other photo showed the result. So
yeah,
it flew from the other side of its sibling and it flew all the way back to the nest. And um, as I recall, this was a little bit early that year, and I was pretty impressed with its ability to have done what it did. Because it hadn't been branching long and it hit its marks and didn't have far to go, but that is enough of a fledge.
yeah,
So that one was graceful.
yeah,
And then we have this guy, and we can go
yep, sure.
we want to go backwards. So sometimes what I've
This one.
noticed is and this is a nest that's easy for me to observe, and not all of them are that great. Um but in this case, this eaglet here, this was I think 2 years ago. And I use this and when we go out in search of new volunteers and we do presentations about the Bald Eagle Nest Watch program in Wisconsin, this is part of my PowerPoint that I do. And my caption for this is when you go to stick a landing, make sure the branch shows up.
Yeah, so you can
So
see that.
And it's funny, and Drew and I are laughing, but it's like kind of not funny, because this is a precarious situation. And, there's a 50% mortality on eaglets. And this is, if this eaglet were down and broke a wing or was injured in some way, I'm there to call, rehab and shuttle it over to rehab where it can be cared for. But if it does this out in a swamp or somewhere where there aren't watchers watching it at the moment it happens, or doesn't have people around to call and say, hey, something went wrong with an eaglet, then it can turn into not such a great situation for the bird. But as it was what Drew just described a few minutes ago, this bird tumbled through this white pine. Um, and if there was audio on this, I mean, my husband and I were both yelling at the bird. Um, and eventually it realized that it was falling and that it had wings, and so it started to sort of flap and very ungracefully caught itself on a branch. But you can get the sense of they don't really get it.
Yeah,
How are they going to land? And then that's where snags are so important. And a snag is a dead tree with limbs on it and no leaves. And this greenery kind of helps trip the eaglets up. If they can't see a structure, they just don't get it right away. And even though they've been watching their parents for a month now, they're just not um, in the sequence of fully understanding it until they kind of screw up a little bit. And again, like we did as kids, you fall down, you stand back up, you try it again.
yeah.
So
But
that's what happened.
it was a good attempt. It definitely was a good attempt. It's actually
It's a
great form
beautiful landing. Yeah.
for fishing. That's like the perfect like fishing stance
Yeah.
right there for catching a fish. So
Yeah.
um yeah, he
That's one of those moments where I was glad I had the camera up and caught that
yeah.
because
So
yeah. Well,
um
well, you can go back to that last one. And
yeah,
and
let's talk
this is
about
the
this
case in
one.
point. Yeah, if it doesn't work out well, this is not the same eaglet. This is an eaglet who got blown out of the nest, probably was flapping and jumping and got blown out of the nest, and it was 5 a.m. in the morning. Sun came up and they realized they had an eaglet on the ground. And so it was a public space, and we were trying to keep the eaglet from harm's way. But I call this photo the gelatinous eaglet because it has lost all body shape. It was exhausted from trying to get away from people and try to flap back up. And so sometimes when they fledge, we call it graceful falling. Um, but once you get down to the ground and it's your first fledge, it is a huge commitment of exercise and strength and stamina and confidence to fly back up.
Yeah.
Um, and this bird no longer had it. So it did go to rehab where it learned better flight skills and then was re-released a week later.
Yeah, and this brings up the point. I know we've mentioned it before on some of the pods. Is this is when we get involved, and this is where I know there's instances that we see stuff going on in the nest, and then there's also instances in nest cams as well, where people are looking for humans to get involved, and this is the perfect case where it's outside the nest. It's kind of in harm's way. So this is where we get rehabbers involved. Stuff that happens in the nest, like sibling rivalries or other stuff. 99.99% out of 100, we're not get involved just because it's nature, it's what happens in the nest, and we just got to respect that and not intervene. But there are situations where we do intervene, and that's when they're outside the nest, and that's a lot of times it's after accidental fledges or fledges that just where the eaglet gets injured, or like this one is just beyond exhausted and needs some help. And
Now,
that's when we get involved.
if we could have reached a branch, I could have maybe placed this eaglet on a branch and not have it taken away from rehab. But this was relatively early on, and I didn't want to make that judgment call. Maybe now I would place it in a branch and let the adults continue to feed it until it got its strength up to make the flight back. But there was nothing wrong with it. It had just exhausted itself. So,
So we'll go back to this and let's talk a little bit about this one.
oh, there's the one of it just standing still. The thing that cracked me up is sometimes they just, oop, did we
Yeah,
go one too many?
I, not,
That's all right. It it uh it landed on that tiny little branch. And so I think eaglets sometimes um if you've ever had a big a puppy and it gets to be a big dog and it still thinks it can sit on your lap and doesn't realize how big it's gotten. I think eaglets can sometimes have that disproportionate sense of their size. They grow so fast. But it landed on that tiny little branch, and then it is just screaming its head off. And it is it is going to walk the tree to try to get to one of its parents, it's the male, the dad of the group. Um, and it's again kind of humorous that it fledged and it did stick the landing. It did a nice landing. That branch is really way too tiny for that bird to be landing on for its talons to feel comfortable on the branch. So it's trying to walk its way to somewhere else or over to a parent. And so I caught this, and this was, as the sun was setting, and we happened to be there to catch this. And also, just so you know, these are my photos or my husband's photos, and these are all severely cropped. So we are not nearly this close to any of these birds. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing if they were feeling pressure of uh, us crowding up.
and just to to review with fledging. It's usually it starts at about 10 week when they're about 10 weeks old. That's on the early side. I'd say the vast majority of the times it's around that 12-week period around there. And then there's others that, they get on to 14 weeks to and beyond in some cases, some rare cases. So
Those are the
um,
third eaglets in
yeah, so
Wisconsin.
and we just wanted to share one of Beth's pictures, and this is one of her nests, and this is an experienced pair.
Yeah.
And what they did is, hopefully you can see that there is a fish out on the branch, and what they're trying to do is coax them. I remember
Third one.
talking to you quite a bit about this, Beth, that year. Is they're just trying to coax that eaglet out to become a fledgling because it's just been in the nest way too long, and it needs to get moving. They need to get out of there. Because one of the biggest concerns and why the period is why the whole timing is with the Eagles and their breeding season is it starts getting very warm in nests, and it also starts getting into the biting fly seasons, which is not good. That starts bringing disease and issues with not getting enough water and all kinds of stuff. So
Well, and
eventually, the more
also it's one of the reasons why you get premature fledges if they've
yeah.
laid eggs too late in the season. You'll get an eaglet that jumps just to get away from the flies.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but this is amazing to see, and this is an experienced pair. This is not a first year pair. They have
Mm.
learned that hey, if we put out basically bait fish and food to bait their eaglets out of the nest to get them to fledge, just because they need to get out of there and they need to get moving. They can't hang out there forever, so that's a very smart eagle pair.
And what happened here is I saw the adult flying in with the fish, and I'd caught a photo of it, and then all of a sudden it didn't have the fish. And my husband was like, it put it on a branch, and so he took this close-up picture so I could see where the eagle had placed it. But then there was this whole family dynamic that went on, where the two had fledged and they were in the snag, and they flew back over towards where this fish was at, and both parents were sitting there and they were talking, the eaglets were talking, the third eaglet was in the nest not saying anything. It was just laying there. And both the fledged eaglets, or now fledglings, both fledglings returned to the snag. And they weren't happy and they were doing a lot of yelling. And then the parents moved over to the snag with it. And eventually the four of them flew off and left the eaglet in the nest and waited, just they were hours coming back. I think it was at the 2 hour mark that it started to shuffle its way out that branch as though it was made of glass.
Yeah.
So it was the parents were saying, don't you dare touch that fish to the other two. And they were not happy about it, but it did work.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they'll stick around most of the nests, and then just for those that view the eagle cams, there's a good chance even after fledge you're going to see them. It's not going to be as obviously as much as when they were in the nest as a hatchling, but you will see them periodically come back to the nest and feed. That's usually kind of still the set point. I have seen some pairs actually completely abandon the nest and head over, closer to fishing areas or whatever. But the vast majority of them do stay around that nest as kind of the hub, and they'll still feed in the nest for usually about at least 6 weeks through the summer, and then after that, then the fledglings will eventually go off on their own. It all depends on the fledgling and how much, but usually by fall they're out on their own and wandering and learning how to be an eagle on their own.
Well, in the case of Big Bear, Jackie and Shadow, they haven't had success for the last several years. So it'll be interesting to see their behavior at the nest if they continue to feed in the nest or if they're going to take them to a fishing roost spot where the adults like to fish from and handle things from there. So that'll be a curiosity to see.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll do it for our fledging episode. And as I said, if you like what we're seeing, subscribe. Send us emails at nestingeaglespodcast@gmail.com. You can also comment on any of the podcasts below, or you can reach us on Instagram and Facebook as well if you have any questions and stuff. So I think if you don't have anything else, Beth, we'll end this special episode. Again, this is a shorter one, so and we'll be back um, after after Memorial Day with some more full-fledged podcast. No pun intended, I guess. So
Bye bye.